thousands of true believers travel to a small town in Georgia looking for a miracle.
On October 13th, 1998, 100,000 Americans abandoned their cars along the roadside and walked through the mud toward a small farm in the rural town of Conyers. The reason? They were about to witness what is now known as the American Miracle of the Sun, an astronomical and spiritual event that seemed to replicate the exact dynamic of the Fatima apparitions of 1917, but in modern times, under the watchful eye of cameras, skeptics, and doctors. In this video, we will explore a case that shook the foundations of both the church and science in the United States. We will examine the impossible instant photographs taken by pilgrims, the results of neurological tests conducted in real time on the visionary's brain, and we will understand why this event in Georgia represents one of the most complex religious investigations in recent history. If you think tangible miracles belong only to Europe's distant past, prepare to change your mind. It all begins in 1990. Nancy Fowler, an ordinary American nurse and housewife, begins claiming that she is receiving messages from the Virgin Mary and Jesus. She does not choose a public place, but her own private home, a farm in Conyers. The apparitions were said to follow a specific pattern, the 13th of every month, a date that in the Catholic world is inseparably linked to the apparitions of Fatima. Word begins to spread. At first, dozens of people arrive, then hundreds, then tens of thousands. Georgia is a predominantly Protestant state, and local authorities suddenly find themselves having to manage a mass movement of Catholics coming from every state in America and from Mexico. Rockdale County is forced to mobilize the National Guard to maintain public order. The logical question is this: why would 100,000 people drive for days just to stare at the porch of a farm? The answer lies in what was happening in the sky. During the gatherings, thousands of eyewitnesses, including television journalists sent to discredit the event, begin reporting physically inexplicable atmospheric phenomena. Just as in Fatima 80 years earlier, the sun seemed to change its behavior. Recorded testimonies describe a solar disk that lost its blinding brightness, allowing people to look directly at it without suffering retinal damage. Then the sun began to pulse, changing color from yellow to silver and emitting pink and blue rays that illuminated the field. Many reported seeing the sun spin on itself or plunge toward the earth, accompanied by a sudden and intense scent of roses filling the air, even though there were no rose gardens nearby. From the point of view of optics and astronomy, such a movement of the sun would destroy the solar system. Skeptics immediately spoke of mass hallucination caused by suggestion and corneal damage. But mass hallucination is an internal psychological phenomenon. It does not leave physical evidence. In Conyers, however, there was physical evidence. In the early 1990s, smartphones did not exist, and digital image manipulation required expensive equipment and time. The pilgrims in Conyers used Polaroid cameras. Instant Polaroid film develops the photograph chemically in the user's hands within seconds, making darkroom tampering impossible. When those present pointed their Polaroid cameras toward the sun during the phenomena, the developed images showed anomalous results that the human eye had not perceived. Hundreds of instant photos taken by different people with different cameras showed the same anomaly, a bright golden rectangle suspended in the sky, which the pilgrims called the door of heaven. Other photos showed solid rays of light in the shape of a perfect cross or luminous silhouettes resembling the Virgin Mary. The phenomenon became so widespread that Victor Balaban, a researcher from the prestigious Emory University, conducted an academic study specifically on these photographs. Other experts in photographic optics explained that pointing a lens toward the sun creates internal reflections inside the lens, known as lens flares. However, the anomaly of Conyers lay in the perfect and repetitive geometry of these reflections. Across completely different cameras, an element that standard optical physics struggled to explain fully. For the Catholic Church and for science, visual phenomena are not enough to authenticate a miracle. The focus of the investigation had to move from the sky to the brain of Nancy Fowler. The visionary voluntarily agreed to undergo rigorous clinical examinations during the alleged state of ecstasy. The goal was to rule out psychiatric illness, temporal lobe epilepsy, or conscious fraud. The most crucial test was conducted by Dr. Ricardo Castañón, a Bolivian clinical neuropsychologist, former atheist, and internationally known for his scientific investigations into Eucharistic miracles and Marian apparitions. The medical team connected Nancy Fowler's head to an electroencephalogram, a device that records the electrical activity of the brain in real time, precisely during the minutes in which she claimed to be receiving a message from Our Lady. The results printed by the machine left the doctors without plausible clinical explanations. A human brain that is awake and active emits beta waves. During relaxation, it emits alpha waves. Nancy's brain, while she was sitting with her eyes open and dictating the messages aloud, began to register fixed delta waves. Delta waves are the slowest brain frequencies of all, and they are recorded exclusively during deep, dreamless sleep, under general anesthesia, or in a coma. From a neurological point of view, the woman was clinically in a state of deep unconsciousness, a condition in which it is biologically impossible to articulate complex sentences, keep one's eyes open, or interact with the surrounding environment. And yet, she was speaking, relaying theologically correct messages and warnings for the United States. Dr. Castañón certified that there was no pathological alteration or fraud. Nancy Fowler's brain was operating in a state that modern medicine had not mapped. What did the messages transmitted in this inexplicable state say? Their content was in perfect alignment with Catholic doctrine. The messages focused on the sacredness of human life, strongly condemning abortion, described as a grave sin that was bringing spiritual and physical consequences upon the West. There was a call to return to the sacraments, to the daily recitation of the Rosary, and to Eucharistic adoration. The Virgin was said to have warned that if the United States did not return to God and did not stop violating moral laws, it would face internal divisions, economic collapses, and unprecedented natural disasters. Faced with 100,000 pilgrims, unexplained photographs, and anomalous neurological reports, what was the official reaction of the Catholic Church? The responsibility for the investigation fell to the then Archbishop of Atlanta, John Donahue. His response was prudent and rigorous. The Archdiocese never officially approved the apparitions of Conyers as being of divine supernatural origin. Clergy were forbidden from organizing official pilgrimages. However, the visionary was not condemned as a heretic or a fraud, and the faithful were allowed to go there privately to pray, provided that Mass was not celebrated directly at the site of the alleged apparitions, but in nearby parishes. Why does the Church stop, even in the face of shocked doctors and solar miracles? Catholicism teaches a clear distinction between public revelation and private revelation. Public revelation, which is binding for the faith, ended with the death of the last apostle, St. John. No apparition, not even Fatima or Lourdes, adds anything to the Bible or to the deposit of faith. Private revelations are reminders, helps from heaven to live the gospel in a specific age. The Church deliberately applies standards of judgment that are almost impossible to overcome. It would rather risk not recognizing a true miracle than authenticate a fraud. On October 13, 1998, as the visionary had announced, the last great public apparition took place. That day, 100,000 people literally brought the state of Georgia to a standstill. After that date, the public messages ceased and the crowds diminished. Nancy Fowler withdrew into private life, carrying with her the mysteries of her visions until her death in 2012. Today, the farm in Conyers is not a giant Vatican-approved shrine, but it remains a quiet place of prayer maintained by an association of the faithful. The true miracle of Conyers does not lie so much in the sun that seemed to spin or in the photographs developed from Polaroids, but in what those events set in motion. During those 8 years, thousands of people who had been far from the church went to confession after decades. Broken families were reconciled, and hundreds of radical conversions were documented and certified by the surrounding parishes. From a Christian point of view, the transformation of the human heart is a miracle even more scientifically inexplicable than the movement of a star. The case of Conyers remains one of the greatest modern mysteries on American soil, a severe call to conversion that is still valid today in the face of the moral crisis of our society. If you believe that the Virgin Mary continues to intercede in order to bring humanity back to her Son, join us and write this sentence in the comments. Lord, open my eyes to the truth. May God bless us all.